Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. We are keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight, and alongside me I've got the political consultant, Emma Burnell, and the former MEP and now live peer in the House of Lords, Baroness Jacqueline Foster. I do love the Baroness thing. I would quite like to be a Baroness.
Oh, Baroness Burnell of Baker's Arms. Don't you think that's got a ring to it? That's where I live.
Of Baker's Arms?
That's where I live.
Oh, it sounds like a local pub.
I think it's named after what was once the local pub and is now a betting shop.
Oh, well, we'll be talking about the Lords in just a few minutes, a bit later on in the programme. I'm asking you specifically, where do you think the House of Lords should be located? Blackpool is one of the suggestions that they should move to. I'll be interested to hear Jacqueline's thoughts on that. But before we get into that, let's talk the police, shall we? Because forces up and down the country, let's face it, are getting an absolute battering at the moment. And there always seems to be, doesn't there, poll after poll that says people have lost trust in them. You've got 6 forces right now in special measures. And this whole kind of concept of policing by consent, some people say that that very concept is hanging by a thread now, not least because of the stories like the one that you've heard today about a serial rapist keeping his role in the Met Police for almost 20 years, despite repeated complaints about his behaviour. So, let's be clear, we all would probably concede that the police need to reform. Do you think they've got it in them, though?
I think it's really hard to see how reform can be led from the inside after such repeated failures over such a long period of time. There is quite clearly a culture of defensiveness within the police force, a protect our own, a don't look, don't see attitude towards poor behaviour, and that can't really usually be solved from the inside. I think the Met should probably be broken up into smaller parts. I would take the very important counter-terrorism unit and separate it, and then have much more community policing based on maybe a borough or tri-borough areas. But beyond the structural reform, I think there needs to be a real look at how we attract the right people into policing.
What do you call the right person?
People who are not interested in... who aren't going into police in order to be a powerful person. I think they're going into police in order to be a community person is the right approach. And I think at the moment we've got I think it's 800 people who are currently under investigation out of a force of 45,000. That's quite a big percentage.
What? And 800?
800 people out of 45,000. That's more than nearly 2% of that workforce, which is quite, who are having investigations reopened.
Because many people will be watching this going, well, if we use Emma's percentage of 2%, that means that 98% of these guys and girls, obviously, they're decent.
No, that 98% are not currently under investigation. That's quite different from they're the good guys. I think there is a problem with both those individuals, the 800 or so, clearly we need to think about, but also how are we attracting people who will want to have the kind of policing that is open and transparent and honest, and not the kind of policing that is self-protecting, self-reinforcing, becomes tribal and almost like it's a gang of its own, rather than the kind that is working in the community to break up that kind of attitude.
Can I ask, by the way, if you're at home and you are a serving police officer or a retired one, whatever, and you hear these conversations about the police, I am interested as to how you feel right now. I mean, how's your morale if you're currently serving? Get in touch, let me know. But Jacqueline, what do you make of it all?
Well, I get tired of phrases that we hear all the time about lessons learned. We have these terrible things that happen, not just in the police, we have it in all sorts of areas, and they go, we've learned all that, and they never seem to learn the lesson. This particular case... it is, of course, it's pretty rare. We know that. We know that the vast majority of police officers are trustworthy, they work hard, they're very proud to do the job that they do. My own view, and I'm no expert in this sort of policing arena, but we listen to how things move and change over the years. I think there's an issue with recruitment. I think this incessant demand that people have degrees these days to do anything runs counter to some of the... I think the public sector type jobs that we need to fill. So that rank and file, I don't blame the rank and file, those on the beat, basically. I think there's a problem with leadership within the police. I think there's a problem, as I said, with recruitment. I think there's a problem with line management in terms of how you, in any business or any whatever you're doing, you have to, people who are working in your team have to be line managed properly. I don't work. I come from an industry that had a no-blame culture. So I don't see the point in blaming people for mistakes they made. What you don't want is cover-ups.
Yeah.
What you want is an openness and you want a frankness where if people, you know, are concerned that they've said the wrong thing, that they are able to be dealt with fairly and obviously maybe put into extra training or stuff like that. So clearly, if we get on to how they police themselves, we have the IPCC, don't we, this independent body. And, of course, you've got one force, I understand, looking into another. And I think they're going to have to rethink how they do that, perhaps. I mean, I think it's very difficult for, you know, civilians to come from outside who are nothing to do with the police. And we get a group of people and they go, right, you need to judge what these two police officers did. Well, we don't know the ins and outs of the job. We know what we can see. We're not stupid. So, of course, I would imagine that you'd have to have very trained people who were trained police officers that were looking into these things, which is quite right. But then it looks at how is the accountability. I mean, this particular case, how somebody ends up as a police officer either before with a criminal record, unless it was they tripped over and found an apple that fell out of a shop. You're not going to blame some kid of 10 and ruin their life. But we know we have people in the police force now. Well, I think the problem is the police service is when they changed it from a police force, which was supposed to enforce the law, to a police service, and I'm not quite sure I don't think it knows what its job is half the time, frankly. So you don't want to rule out anybody wanting to join the police. But by the same token, you want people with a good record. You want people joining for the right reasons. And they also need to understand what their obligations are. We know that the vast majority, they look after us. We rely on them. The first thing that happens, you'll know if you see an act or whatever, we go, oh, 999. So they haven't lost all faith with the public. But I think people are getting cheesed off. Women, as we've said, particularly this sort of misogyny that's going on with a lot of these men, they're in the wrong job.
Yeah.
They're in the wrong job. If you cannot treat your colleague or the people that you have to serve in a proper, grown-up, respectful fashion, you are in the wrong job, as tough as it is.
I agree with most of what you say, Jacqueline. My only thing that I would pick you up on is that in terms of oversight, I think there does have to be a civilian role in that, because ultimately we do have to remember the police are there to enforce the laws on us
crime commissioners
and serve us. And I think there needs to be that pact, and both sides need to be a part of that transparency and oversight relationship.
Simon's been in touch and he says, why are male officers all tarred with the same brush? He says, it seems going on this rate, the only way forward will be to employ female officers. He says he served with the Met Police for 20 years and had exemplary service. I understand what you're saying there. Liam says, I work for Bedfordshire and Norfolk Police as a policeman, and I hate it when problems at the Met tarnish every other police force. I hear you there, but I also do have to point out that there's a number of police in special measures right now. It's not just the Metropolitan Police. This is not just a London issue by any stretch of the imagination. I want your thoughts. Do you still trust the police, by the way? If I was in a situation, I have to be honest, where, I don't know, a police car tried to pull me over, say on the side of a road, being completely honest, I wouldn't get out of my car. I wouldn't, for love nor money. And if you are a decent police officer, that must really frustrate you, because I suspect I'm not alone in that opinion.